Okay, perfect. So we are live. It's a new episode of Robert Spotlight. Robert Spotlight. Eugene CAPON. Eugene, welcome on the show.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Eugene, could you introduce yourself to people that don't know you?
Yeah. My name is Eugene CAPON. I'm a social media futurist. That means I get on stages and I talk about the evolution of technology, specifically in the internet, and how we get to the third generation of the internet, aka the metaverse.
Okay, perfect. So you are a speaker, an author, and you say you are also a social media futurist, right?
That is correct.
That is correct. So let's talk about your book. You know, you write a book called All the Things You Can Do in the Metaverse. You know, it was released in November 2021. Um, could you talk a little bit about this book?
Yeah. So a few months ago, I actually got engaged. And so now I have
Congrats.
oh, thank you. So I now have three nieces and a nephew that are part of my world.
All right.
And I was having trouble explaining to them what Uncle Gene does for a living.
Okay.
And Christmas was coming up, and I went, you know what? I really want to find like a technical book for kids that talk about maybe social media and NFTs and cryptocurrency and VR and AR.
Okay.
And especially since English isn't their first language, Cantonese is. I thought it was really important to try to find something with images to help them on their way. And I honestly couldn't find anything. So I stepped up and I did it myself. And I wrote a kid's book called All the Things You Can Do in the Metaverse. And it actually follows my my niece and nephew, Selena and Jaden,
Okay.
on their adventures going into virtual reality worlds.
Perfect. And so I'm sorry because I lost the connection during like a few seconds. So maybe you talk about this, but are your nephew and niece receive the book?
Oh, of course. I made sure they got a first copy, and I have this great picture of me dressed up like a elf on the shelf, sitting with them reading it for Christmas.
Okay. And right now, could you say that for your family, you know, metaverse, it's obvious right now?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very pragmatic about educating those around me and really going over what the metaverse actually is,
Okay.
because there really is a lot of misinformation about what it is and a lot of marketing buzz and terminology just kind of thrown around. And I see companies using the term used inappropriately a lot. So I've basically become a somebody just going out there and really correcting a lot of misinformation.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's do that. Let's do that a little bit. So Eugene, what is metaverse? Could you talk
Yeah.
about this?
So the metaverse is nothing more than the internet in its third generation. It's not a virtual world. It's not a thing that people are building. It's not a virtual destination, but a digital age. Us as humans, we have this thing where we like to assign names to different age groups, right? So we
Okay.
have like millennials, Gen Z, boomers, that sort of
Yes.
thing. Well, we tend to do it with, technology as well, right? We go iPhone 5, 6, 7, 8, X, whatever, right? And so the internet in its entirety is no different. Back in 1969, we had the first computer to computer transmission coming out of Stanford, I believe.
Okay.
And from there, it launched this thing called the ARPANET, and that was the precursor to the internet. After a while, the ARPANET were basically closed off systems, where the only people who had access to it were educational facilities and government facilities. And a lot of companies were like, hey, now we really want access to this technology. How do we get commercial content on it? And eventually, here in the US, Congress passed a law going, you know, we're going to allow commercial content to be on the internet. And that really launched generation one of the internet. And we called it the information age, right?
Yes.
And after a long time, the internet evolved and new technologies came around, and we became a Web 2 society, or a social media society, right? Because, you know, that's how we communicate as humans, right? Even now, this stream is being sent out to various social networks. I know it's on LinkedIn, and it's probably a couple of other places, right?
Yes. Right.
And now that we are finding different technologies that we consider to be Web 3, we're heading to the third generation of the internet. But what's happening is it's called the bleeding edge, where you start to see other technologies bleed through on either side of the cutoff, right? So
Okay.
even in Web 1, we had things like GeoCities, which is arguably a social media platform, even though it predates Web 2, right? And even when we got to Web 2, you still had a lot of Web 1 infrastructure available, right? It just didn't go away. And so, because of that, we have these bleeding edges where different technologies will overlap the cutoff between the different generations. And we're probably 5 to 8 years away from the metaverse actually being a thing. And it hasn't stopped a lot of people from saying, you know, we're building a metaverse, come to our metaverse. Part of our NFT roadmap is, you know, we're building a metaverse, and which they actually mean is they're just building a virtual world.
All right. So in your words, what would be the difference between a virtual world and metaverse?
The metaverse is the entire internet, including all the underlying infrastructure and technology to support the internet. Like,
Okay.
yeah, like a virtual world is nothing more than a 3D website, technically, right? I mean, you can go to Muse Play, Spatial, Mona, you know, VR Chat, Rec
Mm-hmm.
Room, Horizons. These are virtual worlds, and
Okay.
nothing more. Like, in when people like to say, yeah, you know, come to my metaverse, what they're trying to say is come to a virtual world where we have a closed off presence. But the problem with that is it's running on the internet, and you do not have peer platform to platform portaling, which means you can't go from one platform to the next in the same way that you can go from one website, click a link, and be brought to another website, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the many things that are currently missing for us to have the metaverse.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. So, in your point of view, did Decentraland, Crypto Vexel, Sandbox are metaverse in your definition?
No, they're not. They're saying that these platforms are metaverses is factually incorrect.
Okay.
They are blockchain based virtual worlds, but they're not the internet. They run on the internet, and that's the difference.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you. Because basically, even me, I'm a user on Web3, and I will do until right now the confusion between, Decentraland being a metaverse,
Mhm.
Sandbox being a metaverse. But with your explanation, it's like kind of okay, it makes sense. So right now I get it. So, in your point of view, um, Decentraland, CryptoVexel, Sandbox, or whatever, all of these places are basically places living on blockchain. Right?
Mhm.
So there are uh, some part of the metaverse, but we cannot say that there are metaverse.
No. We would not call them a metaverse. Like that's just a factually incorrect statement. The term metaverse is equal to saying internet, right? So you wouldn't say, yeah, it's the Decentraland internet. It's not,
Makes
or the
sense.
sandbox internet. You wouldn't say that, right?
Yes.
So why would it be called the sandbox metaverse?
Makes
That
sense.
doesn't
Makes
that
sense.
doesn't that doesn't make sense from an educational standpoint.
Okay. So basically, the borderline that you put, being, metaverse being the third evolution of internet, what would
Mhm.
be the borderline? What would be all the things that will live on this layer?
So there are so many different things that are going to make up the third generation of the internet. I mean, NFTs and crypto and VR and AR and holoportation and telepresence and blockchain based digital assets. Um, these are all the different things that run on the internet, right? I mean, we're just getting more sophisticated technology in what we are using to basically replace older technologies in the internet. And when we get there, we're just considering all these new things to be part of the Web3 infrastructure, right? Or the
Okay.
third generation technology infrastructure. Even though a lot of these technologies have been around for a very, very long time, um, the real shift is the sophistication of those technologies and the mass adoption of those technologies. And eventually there will be some power, probably out of the XR safety initiative, or probably Stanford will come along, or some higher government body, and will go, hey, we've had enough adoption. We have enough people using these technologies. We're over the tipping point. We are now in the third generation of the internet. And right now we're just trying to get enough people on board for us to be able to claim for us to be in that third generation, right?
Okay. So in your point of view, when you do you onboard people on a metaverse basically?
Do I block people?
No. Do you onboard?
Oh, do I onboard people?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been onboarding people into XR for 8 years. I mean, I one of my real claims to fame is I had the first in VR show to ever be ordered like a traditional TV show. And that was back in 2017, and it ran for 3 full seasons. One on Altspace and 2 by High Fidelity, which is the updated version of Second Life, basically, which
Okay.
was a direct response to Neil Stephenson's 1992 book, Snow Crash, which actually coined the term metaverse.
Okay. And so to onboard people, did people need to have like a headset to have access to the metaverse?
No, absolutely not. When you are on, basically, if you are using the internet after the shift, you're in the metaverse, right? Again, it's not a digital place, but just the third age of the internet. Anybody using the internet after the shift is technically in the metaverse.
Okay. So it's not because I'm asking question as like it's like beginner question, but I'm pretty
Mhm,
sure that first because I'm not very deep on metaverse,
mhm.
but I know that this question will help people because no, I know because I got a discussion about that last week, and I was talking with like a friend of mine, and we were talking about like the person was trying to buy places on something. The thing is called metaverse something. But when I find out, it was like, oh, it's just a virtual world. It's like you open a website, and it's like you can walking around on you have an interface, and you can walking around on a building.
Mm-hmm.
But this thing was called metaverse. So it's why I know that a lot of people, it's not that obvious. So it's why I'm asking all these questions.
Yeah, no, a lot of companies are using it as a marketing gimmick because they want you to buy into something that seems futuristic, even though blockchain assets and digital land have been around for years. It's nothing new. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, um, I was in a Twitter space not too long ago with a group that said we are the first social media metaverse. And there's probably 500 people in this room. And they got me as like their first question. And where I explained it, where it's not, you guys aren't a metaverse, you guys are a virtual world. And what basically allows you to, call yourself the first social media metaverse? Like, what, in your opinion, allows you to have that claim, right? Because when you claim something like that, and maybe something like that already exists, you're completely trying to discredit people who may have already done this before, right? And so they said, well, we're a virtual world, you have assets, you have social interactions with each other, and then we have blockchain based assets in our own currency. And I'm like, that's it? That's your unique selling proposition? They went, yeah. I'm like, that was high fidelity in 2014. Like,
And what
like
what was
you're,
the reply of that?
yeah, like, and they asked me to leave because I was killing the vibe,
Okay, makes sense.
right? The Because I essentially embarrassed them in front of a room of
Yes, yes,
500
yes.
people, right?
It makes sense.
I mean, when you make outrageous claims that are factually incorrect, and an expert calls you out, probably not a great idea to, you know, ask them to leave, right? Because now I'm using that as like an experience case here on your show, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they, to be fair, before they asked me to leave, they asked, well, what do you want us to do? I said, stop using misleading branding. And they
And
didn't like that. They didn't like that too much.
they didn't like that, but did they change the branding?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
No.
okay.
They're
But
they're
I
still
mean,
they're still using it.
yes. But I mean, the truth is going to appear at some time. So whatever, people are going to find out this thing being incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not today, it's going to be
I mean,
on the
they're
near
just
future.
they're just shooting themselves in the foot, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in the long term.
Okay. Let's get back a little bit about onboarding. When you onboard people on Metaverse, could you describe that?
Yeah.
What are you doing to onboard people?
So right now, education is the best platform, right? Um, there is no metaverse yet for people to be onboarded to, right? But there are the
Okay.
different technologies that are starting to become available that getting people used to is important. And my background is actually in XR, or extended reality. That's augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, right?
Okay.
And so something I like to do is, I'll have like play days where I'll invite people over to like my studio and put them into VR, and I'll usually show them like accounting or rec room based on, what their personality is like, right? And I try to give them the best first introduction to virtual reality I absolutely can. That way it's not their last time in virtual reality, right?
Okay.
I want them to, love the technology and the experience as much as I love it, and the fact that it's given me such a long career already. and we're still at the 3% mark, getting people into these worlds. I mean, yeah, there's a 20% year over year growth in VR adoption, but there's still a lot of people who have never tried a VR headset before. Or when we talk about augmented reality, the extent of the use is probably using a face filter on Instagram, right? Or a lens filter, even though it's so much more robust than that.
Yes. So me on my side, I tried virtual reality maybe 3 times on my on my side, only 3 times. How many hours a week do you spend, or how many hours a day do you spend on a virtual reality mode?
So it really depends on my work week. Some weeks, probably 2, maybe 3 hours a week in virtual reality.
Okay.
And then
a week, not a day, a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I'm like working on a project, I might end up being 40 hours in VR.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
It depends on, my work schedule, right? And the types of projects I'm taking in. I own a production studio called Studio CAPON. We started it after we sold the show, the VR show, and we basically build virtual worlds for clients.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
Perfect.
A lot of those worlds are actually built in VR.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a follow-up question about that, about the tools, maybe the technology used for that. But before that, I just have another question being, when it's for, so when it's for your work, you can spend up to 40 hours. But when it's not for your work, what are you doing on this environment? When it's like
I'm probably working out playing Beat Saber, or
what's that?
Or Beat Saber.
I don't know.
Oh, it's a game where you get 2 lightsabers and blocks come at you, and it's like a rhythm game, and you gotta move really, really fast, kind of like Guitar Hero, but with lightsabers. Or I'm playing Demio with friends, and that's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but in VR. Or I'm playing whatever cool game is available recently. Probably one of my favorite games to play is Half-Life Alyx.
Okay, so it's massively for gaming, right?
Gaming experience wise, a lot of people send me builds for different things, and I'll test them out. One of the things I do for work is I'm a personality host inside of VR environments for events. So like a company might have like a big event in VR and they need a speaker for it. And so, I'll be in like, Rec Room or Spatial or, Alt Space, and I'll, host different events as a personality. And that's part of my job as well.
Perfect. I'm going to talk about your talk at NFT NIC just after that. But before that, let's talk about the tech that you are using when you are building these experiences for client. What are can you name some technology that you are using?
Yeah. So if we're doing 360 video content, which is the baseline for VR, what we're probably using is C4D, After Effects, Adobe Premiere, Audition, things like that. Really, the Adobe Creative Suite. There's a plugin for After Effects that I love to use called Element 3D from Video Copilot. That's Andrew Kramer's group. If I'm building something in a sandbox, there's usually tools already there. One of the more recent projects we did is we actually built a school, an onboarding school for an NFT project called Chronic Cats. And we built their project called the Metaversity. And so with that, we also had to program working elevators, day and night cycles, lights, those boundary boxes so people can't like get on the roof and over the sides. And those are all self-contained elements inside of Rec Room, right? if we're building something a little bit more robust in alt space, we'll be using Unity. If we're doing virtual production, we're using Unreal.
Okay.
So it really depends on the situation and what tool set or technology stack calls for us to get our clients the best work.
Okay, makes sense. There is no like a baseline, like by default, if someone asks, entry level experience, like by default that okay, I'm going to use this stack, and if it's more advanced, okay, I'm going to use this stack. It's can it be like this, or it's a very like every time you have to take all the inquiries of your client to set up the white tools to build it.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. So say I have a client that wants us to use Muse.place, which is a 3JS virtual world builder with VR capability. They have a lot of sandbox tools that we're able to use. And on top of that, we'll probably use C4D and Substance Painter to create all of our models. We'll probably use C4D or mocap data for animations for characters. And then a lot of different platforms, already have integration for Ready Player Me models. So we might use that for avatar bases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Before talking about your talk at NFT NIC, do you have some other thing to say about Metaverse, but with the perspective of something that like a beginner, from a beginner perspective, what would you add on the discussion right now regarding the Metaverse that we didn't say before?
Just be aware that people are probably using the term incorrectly about 90% of the time. And I mean, me and my friends, we get together and laugh at people who use it incorrectly, especially in their, or mostly in their business branding, because they're just using it as a marketing ploy to try to sell, right?
Yes.
And they're completely disregarding what it actually is. And again, it's just the third generation of the internet. That's all it is.
That make me think to one question. Who do you know that are using the word correctly today?
Philip Rosedale, Robert Scoble, Kavya Perlman. These are absolute leaders in our industry. If you look at the president of HTC, he put out a huge post about it. Kathy Hackle. I mean, anybody who is a major educator in this space, we all are using the exact same definition. It tends to be people who are jumping into the space for the first time, trying to start a company, or trying to capitalize on the movement. And,
Yes.
there are people like myself who've been doing this for 8-10 years. I mean, I started making ecto-rectangular maps for different websites back in like 2005. So 17 years I've been periodically, building in this space. And then about 8 years, I really went hard on it as an evangelist and a content creator. And
Perfect.
So long time, right? And for the longest time, we actually didn't even call it, the Metaverse. We just called it, XR, right? As that's what we're referring to, or virtual worlds.
Okay.
And it wasn't until Facebook was like, hey, we're going to change our name to Meta because they want to be the internet, right? And that's just the new version of the internet that's coming up. And they were just trying to be early. And when that happened, suddenly everybody was like, hey, let's go build our own metaverse. And I'm like, that's just not how that works.
Okay. And at the beginning of the talk, you said that most of the things that companies are building today are closed virtual world. So that means that to be part of the metaverse, that should be the opposite, meaning not closed, right?
I'm
That
sorry.
shouldn't be closed. At the beginning of the interview, you said that basically some company or some project call them metaverse, but they are just a closed virtual world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is to be the opposite of that, meaning not a virtual closed world, meaning like not a virtual.
An
Yes.
open peer-to-peer virtual world.
Yes, exactly.
So there are a lot of different things that we actually need to do. And the first time I laid this out was actually at Design Reality, probably 4 or 5 years ago. Some of the technical hurdles that we need to work on for us to get there are cross-platform identity. So you have the same avatar no matter what virtual world you're actually using. You need portaling, which is the usability of going from one virtual world to another. As easy as it is to click a website link and go to another, right? You don't have to download full programs for platforms, right? I mean, 3D websites should be cross-platform by definition, but right now it's so early that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm waiting for human eye resolution tracking. The only VR headset that really does that right now is the Varjo, and it is really expensive and not at the consumer grade level yet.
Okay.
We need better predictive models for loading and unloading content, because when you do over the internet virtual reality, there can be a bit of lag or frames dropped or things like that. And when you have a disconnect between what you're visually seeing and what you're physically feeling because of your inner ear fluid, that disconnect, your body basically goes, hey, there's something wrong and I need to let you know. And that's what causes VR sickness. I thought Google Stadia was a really good play as far as, server side rendering, but for us to get the absolute level that we probably need, we're probably going to need a 6G network, and we're still working on implementing 5G. And I did the math one time. I think that's like 32 terabytes of information per second being downloaded.
How many? Could you say that again?
32 terabytes per second. 32.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Last time I did the math, but of course, that definitely runs on a variety of different, predictive models for how those numbers get calculated and what the technology stack will eventually become to produce that, right? So we do have a lot of technical hurdles that we're still trying to solve. And, eventually those things will get solved and the internet in the 3D state will be much better. And, that's just from the 3D side because, of course, my background is XR and that's usually what I'm focusing on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because I think that what you just said will help people to understand, okay, what we are talking about, what it's needed, and why all the things that claim to be a metaverse today are not.
Yeah. No, they're just capitalizing on trends.
Yes, it's like using a buzzword.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, I'm going to invent the internet. My company is Sandbox Internet.
Okay, let's talk about your speaking at NFT NIC. What would be the topic of your talk?
Yeah, I'm actually talking about this exact subject at NFT NYC, NFT New York. So yeah, no, I'm getting on a stage in front of probably 1,200 people to tell them that the phrasing they've been using in their projects have been wrong the last 2 years.
Are you prepared to be booed? because
Oh,
people are
absolutely.
going to be bad, you know,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you are going to bring like bad news, you know.
Yeah, no, nobody likes bad news, and usually there's a bit of a mixed reaction when I bring up these concrete, definitions set by industry standard leaders, right? So it's always a mixed bag. There'll either be people who go, yeah, but I'm going to continue to use it even though I know you're right. There are people who go, I think you're wrong, and for this reason, because insert stupid fact here. Or there are people who go, you know what, I feel better educated, I accept your definition, and I'm going to go do more research on it. And I will take I'll go look up the names that you dropped, who also believe in these things and who have been at this much longer than even I have.
Perfect. And what is the setup? Do you have 10 minutes, 20 minutes?
I got one of the 10-minute slots.
Okay. So you will
So
have to go straight to the point.
yeah. So basically, I'm going. Um, we're building a metaverse. Come visit me in my metaverse. Uh, building a metaverse is part of our NFT roadmap. These are all factually incorrect statements, and let me tell you why. And then I go into the history of the internet, and then I still think VR worlds should be, or 3D worlds should be, part of your roadmap, and here are my case studies of why I think it's a good idea, even though you've been using the term incorrectly the whole time.
Perfect.
Yeah. So just call it what it is, but keep adding it and keep building.
Perfect. Do you have any article, blog post expressing everything, or even a video of you saying the same thing? Explaining what it is, why you shouldn't say that.
This is my first real public on stage talk since 2019.
Okay.
And basically COVID kind of screwed up a lot of my plans over the last couple of years, especially for big engagements. And now that we're kind of society wise over COVID, it's time to get back out there and get back to work.
Perfect.
Yeah. But if you would like to see some of my older talks, especially where I was at Design Reality or speaking at Adobe or on the Twitch stage live. So I was on the Twitch's Twitch channel talking about these exact same like building virtual reality things. You can go to hightechinfluencer.com, and I have a full list of different past talks that you can go and check out.
Could you we say the name of the website, please?
hightechinfluencer.com. So high as in HIGH or higher. Perfect. Right?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to put this link on the description of the interview. Do you have any last thing, or maybe basically open mic? Do you have something that you want to share or express about the subject?
Yeah, you know what? If you're entering the space for the first time, don't focus on getting rich or making a fortune. Just take the time to explore, to learn, to become part of the community in which we value the new ideas and new concepts. And while looking back on our past of the road that we are that have been built behind us, and help us build the road that is ahead of us. One of the things I get a lot of when I do this is I always get college kids who are like, I'm graduating, I'm going out into the real world for the first time, and I feel absolutely lost. And I like to remind people that I graduated high school in 2004, but I didn't really find my calling in XR until 2014. So there was a 10-year period where I was just learning and creating and building those things, because the thing that I was meant to do didn't exist in a way yet for me to capitalize on it. And so that feeling of you being lost might actually just be the feeling of you being early.
I like it. Last question for you, Eugene. It's like a ritual on the show, on the Robert Spotlight show. It's for you. What is NFT?
An NFT an NFT is just a non-fungible token. Originally, it was supposed to be, you went to the grocery store, you bought groceries, you got a digital receipt, right? That's all it was supposed to be. And eventually, there was this really cool project called CryptoKitties, where they took the technology and they started doing some really cool, fun, unique concepts. And that kind of launched the entire NFT art community in what it is now. And I'll be honest, that I've made my career on predicting the future. And this is one of the only times where it came so far out of left field that I was like, how did we get here? Right. And so I love the NFT community. There's so much passion and creativity and, people wanting to like learn it. And unfortunately, the average NFT project only makes like $600. And in terms of the work in art and programming and community building behind them, you are going to make pennies per hour.
Yes.
In the relationship. And especially since NFTs have been overpriced and it's been a bubble, right? Like even with like, say, virtual land, right? Land gets its value from foot traffic usually, especially digital. And the average parcel of land does not get the foot traffic that it should be getting for the value that we've been equating with it, especially when you're talking about buying land in one of these virtual worlds for, marketing purposes, right?
Yes.
Like it just doesn't make sense. You would be better off with just running Facebook ads. And you would probably do 100x the value in return for what you spent on one of these virtual pieces of land. So I think it's really something to think about.
Thank you for your perspective. You talk with a lot of maturity, so thank you. It was a fun show for me. I learned a lot, especially about Metaverse, because that was the subject of the day. Thank you for that. I wish you a great luck for your 10-minute talk at NFT NIC. Be prepared to be booed because people are going to be bad.
Oh, I'm fully prepared.
Like this. And so basically it was fun. And I'm going to wish you a great end of your day or start of your day. I don't know what time is it for you.
It's like noon.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to wish you a great lunch, and we talk another time.
It was great talking to you, Robert.
Thank you. So I'm going to end the live in 3, 2, 1, and it should be stopped.